Go ahead, Mr. Albee.
Thank you, Judge. Dr. Chambliss, prior to taking the stand this morning, you had a chance to look at this chart here.
Yes, I did.
This chart is marked as Exhibit D14. Can everyone see that? Okay. I can't see me, but can you?
Yes.
You can see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I can.
Judge, let's go back just a little bit.
Let me, yeah, would you?
Mark, can you see the dirt? All right, this is difficult. Okay, now where do I go? And in Julie Jensen's gastric contents, there were 3,940 micrograms of ethylene glycol in each milliliter, right?
That's correct.
And a milliliter is measured on, hand this to you, Dr. Chambliss. Could you show the jury where on there is the 1 milliliter?
It would be the bottom rung, the black horizontal mark on this particular cylinder.
Okay, so that's, and total that holds, or what's the top mark?
It says 10 ml, which would be the topmost black horizontal mark.
Okay, and so a microgram is 1 millionth of a gram, true?
That's true.
So 1 gram has 1 million micrograms.
That's true.
And there's a little less than 4,000 of these micrograms per milliliter, right?
That's correct.
And so to find the total amount of ethylene glycol in the stomach, what you do is you multiply the per milliliter times the total number of milliliters. True?
That's not true, but it according to what we're doing here, yes.
Well, that is how a toxicologist would figure it out, right?
No, it's not quite that simple, really.
Okay. Tell me why, because I've had testimony to that effect, so.
Objection, counsel is now editorializing, Your Honor.
It's because when you're drawing the material up, you may have a sediment, you may have a liquid, and you may not get the total amount that's present in there.
But the toxicologist's job is to take the sample and make sure that it's mixed well enough and everything else so that the sample is representative, right? That's the toxicologist's job?
It's representative, but it may not give you the total amount that's present in there.
Okay, but that's what the toxicologist would do to figure this out.
He should, yes, he's trying to do that, yes.
Okay, this is the only way to do it, right?
I can't tell you that.
Okay, you don't know of any other way to do it other than the way I'm doing it here, right?
I can't give you the accurate amount. That's the only thing I'm telling you.
I'm asking you, do you know any other way to do it other than the way I'm doing it here?
I just thought I answered that. I said, I don't know. I don't know.
You don't know of any other way?
No, I don't know of any other way.
Okay, so so this way, which toxicologists do use, right?
I don't know. I don't know.
You do know that there's a total of 660 milliliters in the stomach.
Yes.
And by the way, your report said around or just over or something like that, 660 milliliters. It didn't say exactly. Do you recall that?
I don't recall.
Do you have your report in front
No.
of you? Okay.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yes, I do. It says greater than 660 ml.
That's okay. And when you say greater than 660 ml, what is it really close to 660 ml, or I mean, what if it? Why are you
It's
using
obvious.
that?
I'm using greater because it's between 660 and 700. I'm not quite sure the exact level. When you have a measurement device that you're using in the morgue area, you don't know the particular gradations in between there sometimes.
Okay, but it's going to be pretty close to 660 ml. That's sort of the best.
At least 660.
Okay. And then, so you multiply how much is in each milliliter times the total number of milliliters, and you get 2.6 million micrograms, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. And that might sound like a lot, but it's 2,600 milligrams, right?
Yes.
And that equals 2.6 grams.
Yes.
True? And a milliliter, when you showed us a milliliter,
Yes.
a milliliter of water is equal to 1 gram in weight, right?
Yes,
I mean, a gram is a weight measurement, and a liter or a milliliter is a volume measurement.
that's correct. That's correct.
So what we have is 2.6 grams of ethylene glycol in the stomach.
That's correct.
And the weight of ethylene glycol is what, do you know?
I'm not sure the weight of ethylene glycol.
Is it pretty close to water?
I couldn't tell you that. I don't know the exact weight of ethylene glycol.
Okay. But 2.6 grams, that's less than 1/10 of an ounce, right?
Yes, it is.
An ounce is about 28 grams, a little bit more.
Around 28 grams.
Okay. And this ends up being about 1/2 teaspoon of ethylene glycol in Julie Jensen's stomach, true?
If we're carrying it all the way down, it's a 1/2 teaspoon.
1/2 teaspoon. So there are not ounces in the stomach as you testified yesterday, right?
I don't know how many is present in the stomach as I testified to yesterday.
Calculation says 1/2 teaspoon.
I can't, that's just one small eluate that's taken out of 100 ml. I can't extrapolate back and give me the amount present in the stomach, as I said yesterday.
Well, you can't, then there's not a large amount, as you said yesterday, right?
That amount to me is a large amount.
You don't, well, tell me then, to have a large amount, we need to quantify. You tell me, what is that amount that's large? How much is in that stomach?
Well, a lethal amount is 2,000 to 4,000 micrograms per ml of ethylene glycol in the blood. That's the lethal amount.
What, I'm sorry, could I have the last question read back, please?
Question. But well, tell me then, to have a large amount, we need to quantify. You tell me, what is that amount that's large? How much is in that stomach?
That's a large amount. Between 2,000 and 4,000 is a large amount.
But that's not how much is in the stomach, that's how much is per milliliter, true?
Sure.
And to figure out whether it's a large amount in the stomach, you have to know how much is in the stomach, right?
Yes, I agree with that.
And you don't know how much is in the stomach, right?
And I don't think anyone else would. No, I do not.
So if a toxicologist comes in here and testifies that that's a reasonable way to figure out approximately how much ethylene glycol is in the stomach, you would disagree with that person?
Yes, I would.
And your experience in doing these kind of calculations is what?
My experience is that you can't, there are too many factors involved with directly measuring a sample, particularly gastric contents, because gastric contents are the worst type of sample to analyze.
Gastric contents could be tainted?
They could be tainted. There's so many other items present in there that it distorts the exact amount that you have present in the sample.
And if the gastric contents were tainted, then the results in this case would not be reliable, true?
I can't vouch for that. I don't do it on a regular basis. But by talking to toxicologists, they tell me that on a regular basis, that gastric contents are very hard to determine.
Well, you just told me that they also can be tainted, right?
That's correct.
And so how do we know they're not tainted in this case?
That's true. We don't know if they're a higher level or a lower level.
Or whether there was any there at all, maybe?
I can't, it's detectable, and their level, their cutoff level shows that it's present in the gastric contents. So we know it's detectable.
Well, you understand if the result, if it was tainted by something, then there wouldn't be any in there. That's one possibility, right?
If it shows up with nothing in there, that's a possibility.
And you don't even know whether you took a gastric sample, right?
It's obvious I took a gastric sample.
And it's obvious why?
Because it was submitted to St. Louis University Toxicology Lab. It's obvious I took a toxicology sample of gastric contents.
You don't remember that, taking that gastric
I
sample?
may not remember it, but it's
Well,
obviously sent, yes.
I mean, is that a yes?
That's a yes.
You don't remember taking it. It's not in your report, right?
That's correct.
You didn't take a vitreous sample, right?
No, I did not take a vitreous sample.
Okay. And you know that as well as you know the gastric sample?
I don't know. I don't know.
You don't know if you know that information as well as you know about taking the gastric sample?
This is a 1998 case. I told you I don't remember all the details.
But you just told me you're positive you took the gastric sample.
Because it ended up at the toxicology lab at St. Louis University. That's the only way I knew that.
And you've testified you didn't take a vitreous sample.
From my report, that's what I said. I don't know that I took the vitreous sample or not.
And your report says, well, a moment ago you said you knew you didn't take a vitreous sample.
From my report is what I was referring to, and that's all I could rely upon, what my report says.
If all we can rely upon is your report, there is no gastric sample either, right?
That's correct.
Show the witness exhibit D15. That's a hospital testing of the vitreous fluid of Julie Jensen, right?
It has Julie Jensen's name and St. Catherine's Hospital, yes.
And it has vitreous fluid, right?
It does have vitreous, humor, fluid, comment 1, 2. Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
From Julie Jensen.
Yes, it does.
And the only person who would have taken that vitreous fluid is Dr. Michael Chambliss.
I couldn't say it was Dr. Michael Chambliss that took the fluid. I couldn't tell you that.
Well, Julie Jensen's body was cremated, right?
Yes, but the doctor doesn't always take the vitreous sample. I may have taken the vitreous sample, may have been the chief deputy medical examiner there. I can't tell you who took that sample.
You don't even know if a sample was taken.
That's correct.
You don't know if a gastric sample was taken.
That's correct.
Did you do any research last night, Dr. Chambliss?
No.
Did you consult anyone?
Yes, I did consult someone. I consulted people in my office to send me the lethal levels for ethylene glycol.
Because you didn't know, right?
It wasn't my responsibility when I came here. My responsibility was to tell what I did in the preliminary stages of doing the autopsy. And that was my responsibility.
I agree that was your responsibility. Then why did you give an opinion without having the knowledge necessary to give that opinion yesterday on the hypothetical question, Dr. Chambliss?
Objection, Your Honor. The question assumes the existence of a fact, not an evidence. In fact, it is a compound question.
The objection's overruled.
It's because, in my opinion, I thought I knew the level of ethylene glycol is present in the blood that would be lethal.
Well, do you know what the term outlier means?
No, not according to, you'd have to enlighten me on the outlier.
You've never used the term outlier?
Never.
And an outlier is something that is, for instance, if we're talking about the lethal amount of ethylene glycol in the blood, an outlier would be something that falls outside that range. That is, maybe 95% of the people would fall within a certain range, but there would be outliers that are outside of that range, right?
If you say so. I don't know.
Well, you're familiar with that concept, right?
No, I said I wasn't familiar with that concept.
Well, you're familiar with the concept in medicine and science that there's oftentimes a range in which most people fit, and then that there are other people who fall outside the range, right?
Yes.
That's not an unusual concept in medicine, true?
That's not unusual.
And it's not the ethylene glycol in the blood that kills you, is it?
It's not ethylene glycol that kills you.
Right. It doesn't matter how much is in the blood so much as it matters what's happened to the ethylene glycol when it's metabolized in the rest of your body, true?
That's also true.
And so it could be, for example, that the oxalic crystals and issues relating to the glycolic acid that would cause the death. It's not the ethylene glycol in the blood, right?
That's one possibility.
And so it's one possibility that even with a low blood level, somebody can die from ethylene glycol, right?
That's one possibility.
Right. It is possible to die with that low of blood level, true?
Is possible.
And you've never studied ethylene glycol to know what percentage of the people might pass away with that kind of low blood level, true?
I haven't because there are very few cases.
And most of the cases that do arise are suicide rather than homicide, true?
I don't know.
You don't know, again, because you haven't studied ethylene glycol, true?
I have not studied ethylene glycol.
You would acknowledge you are not an expert in ethylene glycol, true?
That's correct.
Now, would you agree that no ethical medical examiner would give an opinion to a reasonable degree of certainty in a case they were handling without knowing as many facts as they could?
I can't agree to that.
Okay. Which part don't you agree with?
Well, there are ethical medical examiners that do give opinions that when they don't have all the facts.
Okay. Maybe that's too broad, but you would want to do a full investigation, right?
Hopefully you have all the information, yes.
And that's in this case, Dr. Chambliss, you didn't give an opinion when you did the autopsy because further studies were pending. You needed more information, right?
That's correct.
And you didn't think it would be ethical to take a crack at a cause of death based on the information you had at that point, true?
That's my usual practice, that's true.
Now, yesterday you gave an opinion to a hypothetical question that had very few facts, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're referring to, so that...
Mr. Jamboys asked you a question that was a hypothetical question, and it assumed that a witness had said that Mark Jensen sat on the chest of Julie Jensen, and it assumed that the toxicological levels were as stated there, and it assumed that there were oxalic crystals in Julie Jensen's kidneys. Those are what I recall. Do you recall any other facts in that hypothetical?
No, that's what I recall.
Okay, so that was very few facts in terms of this total case, correct?
That's correct.
And for instance, you didn't have any facts about what's in the police reports in this case, right?
No, I did not. I was working on this hypothetical.
You don't know what all the witnesses have to say in this case, right?
That's correct.
You don't know about Julie Jensen's extensive history of depression, right?
I knew about her history of depression.
Did you read Dr. Spiro's report evaluating her?
I did not have it available. I just knew about her history of depression at the time of the autopsy.
And, well, did you know that additional information came to light after that time?
No, because it was strictly a pending status of my autopsy report at that time.
And if you were doing a full report in this case, you would take a look at that evidence of depression, true?
That's true.
And you would want to have as much information as was available, right?
That's correct.
And you didn't have any of that depression information when you answered the hypothetical, right?
That was not part of the hypothetical. That's correct.
All right. And you hadn't reviewed all the expert reports in this case, right?
I hadn't gone through all the expert reports.
You would be interested in knowing what those people had to say, right?
That would be important to come up with the manner of death, yes.
Oftentimes you like to consult with a forensic toxicologist because they know more about toxicology than you do.
That's correct.
And you didn't have that available to you?
That's correct.
And you didn't have any information about the particular witness involved, right?
No, I did not.
And therefore, you're unable to determine whether he's worth any weight at all, right?
I don't know how to answer that exactly. I don't know his credibility. I leave that to others.
Well, you've done a whole bunch of death investigations in your life, right?
Yes, I have.
And in some of those cases, there's a witness who has lied, right?
That's correct.
That happens quite often.
I don't know that. I don't get the police reports of liars. I really don't. I don't know that part.
Well, you're telling me when you get the police report, if there are like 3 different versions of events, the police determine who's lying and they X that out so you don't get the version of the liar?
I get those pretty much in child abuse cases, but other than those types of cases, I don't get a lot of information about that.
You frequently get contradictory statements from witnesses, right?
No, I do not. We do not get very many police reports.
Okay. You just don't see them.
No, I don't get the reports. We talk to the police officers. They provide information to us. They don't go through every detail of their questioning with us. We get their opinions about the particular case that they have.
So if the police do a bad investigation, you're left with not enough, then you have bad information yourself, right?
We can have bad information, yes.
Okay. I asked you yesterday about, I asked a question about if something or other was a post-mortem artifact. You do know what a post-mortem artifact is, right?
Yes, I do.
What does that mean?
That means it's a particular finding that occurs as a result of something that happens after death. It could be an injury. It appears to be an injury that you see when the person's alive, but it actually occurs after they die.
And then there are some things that happen in the dying process that can create observable symptoms. I don't know if that's the right word.
It wouldn't be symptoms, it would be signs.
Okay. And is that true that there are some things that happen in the dying process, like there's increased body pressure that can create signs?
There are increased changes. It depends on what you're describing specifically, but there are some changes that can take place.
There are some changes that take place that could be due to something that happened before death, or they could be just part of the dying process. True?
That's a wide area there. I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Okay. Now, yesterday we spent some time talking about this small amount of soft tissue hemorrhage adjacent to the ribs, right?
We did spend some time on that, yes.
Right. And it's a small amount, true?
I'd have to look back and see how I described it in my report.
That's at page 5, Doctor.
And where were you referring to? I'm not sure.
Yes, page 5 under musculoskeletal system, second sentence.
Okay, because it's also on page 3. That's why I was asking.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I see what you're referring to.
At page 5, it says there's a small amount
Sure,
of
I see
soft
that now.
tissue, right?
I see that.
And where are you referring to?
Under internal examination, right beneath that. It's in both places. It's the same
I
wording.
see. Okay. And that small amount of hemorrhage, that could be from something that happened to Julie Jensen a day earlier, right?
I can't say that.
But you can say that it.
Objection, a day earlier than what? The question's unclear.
Fair enough. That's reasonable. That could be from a day before her time of death. That small amount of soft tissue hemorrhage, right?
I can't say. There's not enough that needs to be more study to give me a time frame on that specifically.
Okay. And that's why I've asked the question in terms of it could be from the day before, right?
Yes.
And so the answer would be yes, right?
No, it's not. No, I mean, it's not from a day before. I wouldn't say it's from a day before.
I'm not asking you if it is from the day before. I'm asking you whether it could be from the day before.
And I say no.
Okay. And what's the longest after an injury that you could see some small amount of soft tissue hemorrhage in this area?
And a small amount of soft tissue hemorrhage from a day before should bring some elevation of that hemorrhage towards the skin surface. And you would tend to see bruising on the underlying fat or skin surface. It should start to move up towards the top surface.
But if it's a very minor injury, you won't ever have the bruising and you could still have some of that soft tissue hemorrhage, right?
But I don't know what it is from the description here, so I don't have a photograph of it to tell you that. But from a day before, it should start moving up towards the skin surface.
But if it's so minor, you could have an instance where you'd have that small amount of hemorrhage and no bruise. Even
I
if
didn't
it's the day
characterize it as minor, though. I said a small amount of hemorrhage. You
Right.
characterized it as minor. I didn't call it minor.
Well, is that a word you would use?
No, I said a small amount. I didn't say minor.
Right, I know, but small is another way of saying minor, right?
No.
Because if you wrote that there was a significant amount, then that would be more significant than a small amount, right?
No, minor puts a designation on it as far as minor, moderate, severe. Small is quantity. Small, medium, large. All I'm doing is quantifying it. I'm not labeling it as minor, moderate, severe.
And you don't recall right now if it was minor, right?
I called it small amount. I didn't call it minor. So I didn't quantitate it as far as severity is concerned.
Sir, I asked you if you recall if it was minor.
And I said, no, I called it small.
But minor relates to severity, and so now I've shifted to severity, and I'm asking, do you recall that it was minor?
I don't know. I don't know what it is.
If it was something more than minor, you would have put that in your report, right?
I don't use those terms. Yeah, I mean, I would be speculating about that, and I don't speculate about stuff. I'm a morbid anatomist. I describe things. I don't speculate about that degree of severity here. And that's the reason why I put a quantity.
So you're saying you would never use the word minor in one of your reports? You just...
I can't even remember the last time I've used the word minor.
Could you please go to page 1 of your report? Under external examination, second sentence, the body shows signs of attempted medical attention which will be described later. A few minor blunt trauma injuries are also identified.
I did use the term. I did use it in this particular sentence. So yes, I have used it.
Can you tell me what other answers you've been wrong about that I just didn't have the information here to point out today?
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel's arguing with the witness.
What would you like me to answer? I don't know what to say, Your Honor, to him. I don't know what he wants me to say to that question because it's such a broad question. Such a broad question. I don't know what he's...
That's your answer. Go ahead.
Are there any other questions that I've asked that your answers were actually guesses to?
I try not to guess when I'm on the stand here, Counselor. I try to give as straightforward an answer as I can.
Now, this rib area, small amount of tissue hemorrhage, whatever caused that was not enough to cause a bruise, true?
It didn't bring a bruise up to the surface, that's correct.
And there was no rib fracture, right?
That's correct.
And this could be from something, you would acknowledge at least that this could be from something that Julie Jensen did to herself prior to her death. I mean, bumping into something or whatever, right?
That's a pretty broad situation. I don't know how to answer that question.
Well, I'm just saying, there's nothing very specific about this type of injury. It could happen from just about any kind of minor bump, right?
I can't answer that. I can't agree with that statement. I just can't answer that.
Well, why can't you answer that?
Because you're not giving me specific examples that I can apply it to. If there are examples I can apply it to, then I may be able to answer the question a little clearer. But if you're giving me a whole expanse of possibilities, there's no way I can properly answer the question. So I'd like to properly answer the question and not guess about it.
Well, I'm asking if she bumped into a doorway hard because she was in kind of an intoxicated state from drinking ethylene glycol. Could that leave a small amount of soft tissue hemorrhage without leaving a bruise and or fracturing the rib or anything?
That's possible.
So that's all this might be, right?
That's possible.
Okay. And another possibility that was suggested by Mr. Chambliss is that somebody sat on her chest when she was on her side.
With the positioning of her arm in that location, yes, that's a possibility of how you could get that injury.
Okay. And are you saying what would cause that damage then? The sitting or the arm?
It's a combination of the pressure from the top and the bottom.
But would you expect the bruising on the top or the bottom?
You don't tend to see bruising a lot of times unless the person has easy bruisability, so expecting bruising is not something I can answer all the time.
Now, those photographs were taken after medical attention had been given to Julie Jensen, right?
She had really no medical attention except placing EKG pads on her.
Okay, and you might have to move the body to put EKG pads on, right?
Not necessarily.
But she's on her side, right?
All you can do is just put them up under where the body is. You don't even have to move the body.
When she's on her side, you don't think there's any movement required? Is it possible that, you don't know if they move the body, right?
That part I don't know.
Right, and they might have to move the body to put on EKG pads, true?
Some people do, yeah.
Right, and the photographs were taken after the EKG pads were put on, right?
I'm assuming so. The first time I seen the photographs were a day here prior to testifying.
And they may have moved the body to immediately check on vital signs, right?
I don't know. I have no way of knowing that. I wasn't at the scene.
If you were a first responder, that's what you would do, right? Is first check to see if the person's alive, or you can give medical assistance to keep them alive.
I'm not a first responder, and I can't tell you what they do.
You're a doctor.
But I'm not a first responder. I don't know what the first responders do.
You're a doctor.
I'm a forensic pathologist. I've never done any resuscitation. I am a doctor, but I've never resuscitated a person, and you wouldn't want me resuscitating a person.
Dr. Chambliss, I'll get to my next question in a moment. My first question is, you, sir, are a doctor.
Yes, I am.
Ask another question, please, Mr. Albee.
And you had medical training to become a doctor.
That's correct.
And it's obvious if a person was in some distress, the first thing you do is try to give them some medical attention, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And you don't know if Mark Jensen, upon finding his wife, moved her to check for vital symptoms and checked, right?
That's correct.
And that wouldn't be an unusual thing to do, correct?
That's not unusual whatsoever.
And he may pick her up and look at her or hug her or do anything and then place her back down on the bed, right?
That's possible, yes.
And in doing that, he may put her back in a position in which her nose is crushed into the pillow, true?
Not crushed into the pillow, I don't think.
Well, he drops her and her face goes in the pillow, correct?
That's a possibility. It goes into the pillow.
Right. And you said normally you wouldn't see a nose that looks like the one in the photograph of Julie Jensen, correct?
That's correct.
But sometimes you could have that without any pressure being applied, true?
No.
Cartilage is very pliable, right?
Not to that degree.
Now, you examined the body the next day, right?
That's correct.
And there was absolutely no damage to the nose that you noted whatsoever.
Well, I put it in my report that way, but I could be wrong, as you've pointed out in other items here.
So you're willing to agree you're wrong if it helps the state's case. You're not so willing to agree you're wrong if it hurts the state's case.
I'm just responding to something that you asked that said if I could respond to something I may have been wrong about, and that's something I may have been wrong about.
Now, Detective Ratzberg was at the autopsy, right?
Yes, he was.
And Roger Johnson was there, who works in the medical examiner's office, right?
That's correct.
And they were both at the scene of at the Jensen home?
I couldn't tell you that for sure, if they were both there.
Okay. Do you know if either of them was there?
I'm not quite sure.
Well, if there is an officer that's at the home or a medical examiner, they would tell you what they observed. That's something you'd be interested in knowing, right?
It would be something I'm interested in knowing, yes.
Right, because you're conducting your investigation and you want to know what those circumstances were in the home, true?
That's true.
And so you would have said, what did you see, right?
That would be something I'd ask, yes.
Right. And if they were at the home, they would have told you about this, this nose situation, right?
I would hope they would, yes.
And if they had told you about the nose, you would have given extra attention to it, right?
Yes, I would.
And you didn't find anything, even in light of that kind of information and your observations of the nose, that made it worth putting in your report.
Well, I didn't know if I had the information, first of all, to answer your question. So if I would have had the information, I may have put it in my report. So I don't know if I had the information.
And are you aware of any report from any medical examiner anywhere in which they thought any of the photographs of the nose were significant?
I'm not aware of anything about that at all.
Do you know whether that's a new theory that just showed up for the first time in the last couple months?
As I said, this is the first time I've seen the photographs, just prior to coming to testify.
And ultimately, doctor, your opinion is you don't know what killed Julie Jensen, right?
Well, the approximate cause is asphyxia by smothering.
Wait a second. How many times have you said that your opinion in this case is undetermined or pending further studies?
I've said that a number of times.
Right? And that's still your opinion, right?
That's not my opinion.
Oh, so based on this hypothetical, you've changed your opinion?
Based on some findings in the autopsy report, I've changed my opinion.
Oh, so you're relying on this witness testimony, right?
I had to rely on additional information to go from a pending status to a cause of death.
Tell me why you find the witness statement to be reliable, Dr. Chambliss.
I have to rely on information provided to me.
No matter
And the
how
other, can I answer the rest of that? And by finding the levels in the toxicology for ethylene glycol being very low, not within the lethal range being 2,000 to 4,000 micrograms per ml, to me, it's not in a range in which I felt that that was the cause of death. It could be a contributing factor to death, but it's not in and of itself the cause of death. I think the proximate cause of death is that the substantial factor there is asphyxia by smothering.
Dr. Chambliss, yesterday afternoon, you had no opinion in this case.
No, I did have an opinion in the case.
You had no opinion as to cause of death. You had, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, right?
At what time during my testimony? Because there were 2 times when you asked me multiple scenarios.
I didn't ask you any scenarios. What I said is, in this case, based on the information you have and the work that you have done, I said, what is the cause of death? And you said, I don't have enough information.
At that preliminary stage, prior to receiving any additional information.
I'll let the jury decide that.
Objection, Your Honor. The answer, please.
And I thought you were saying it was based on the information you received last night, or is that not the case?
As far as, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
I'm sorry, bad question. So you're willing to give an opinion about ethylene glycol and that could not be the cause of death, even though you've acknowledged you're not an expert?
Yes.
You're willing to give an opinion on ethylene glycol, even though you have not consulted with a forensic toxicologist in this case?
Yes.
You're willing to give that opinion, even though you've already said you don't know how much is in the stomach?
Yes.
You're willing to give that opinion, even though you say that you would always consult a forensic toxicologist in this kind of case?
Yes.
You're willing to give an opinion, even though you have not done an ethylene glycol case in 20 years?
That's correct.
And you've done no research on ethylene glycol other than a few pages that were sent to you yesterday.
The lethal levels, which is important to me.
Now, again, I asked you whether you knew what percentage of people might die at the kind of level Julie Jensen had, and you said you didn't know, right?
That's correct.
And you're giving that opinion even though you don't know whether maybe 10% of the people would die with that kind of blood level.
If that's your opinion, I don't know what the percentage is. I can't tell you.
But wouldn't that be significant if it wasn't unusual or that there were cases in which people died with that kind of blood level?
If it's credible information as you're giving me, I'd have to find out if it's credible information.
Well, as a medical examiner, that's why you would do research, right?
I did research last night on the level, and I read about ethylene glycol, the levels.
It's not, being a doctor or toxicologist, it's not like you can just look at information like a cookbook or something, right?
We don't use just levels to determine when a person dies. A pathologist uses more than just a level. You have to consider the entire individual. If we work just on levels of what's there, then we could be wrong a lot of times.
You just said if you worked just on levels, you could be wrong a lot of times. That's what
For
you
low
said.
levels in particular.
Right. And what you're doing is working on the level in the blood alone and giving us the opinion that it wasn't ethylene glycol.
On a low level within a range of when people die. If you have a low level where people die in a certain range, that's a possibility that an individual may not die from that. If you have a very high, extremely high level, then I have a lot more confidence that that may be the cause of death.
Right. The problem is, even if it's a low level, you can't rule it out.
You can't totally rule it out.
And you can't rule out ethylene glycol in this case.
I feel a lot more confident to rule it out.
Now, you also acknowledge that the blood level is less important than the metabolites in the body, right?
That's true.
It's less important than the kidney function, for example.
That's true.
What information do you have about kidney function in this case?
There's no information about her kidney function.
And so you're not able to take that into consideration.
Well, I do know that she does have urine in her bladder. So we do know that her kidneys are not totally shut down. Her kidneys are able to produce 150 ml of urine. So she does have some kidney function.
Yesterday I asked you when the last time she went to the bathroom was, and you said you couldn't even say if it was in the last day because there was some evidence of oxalic crystals in her urine, and that might prevent her from being able to go to the bathroom normally.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that part. I said I didn't know when the last time she went to the bathroom. I didn't add all of the additional information.
And you said part of that, why you couldn't say how recent it was, is because you noted that there could be some damage that would prevent her from creating urine normally.
I don't know if I said any of that. I think that's your words. I don't believe I said any of that.
And what source, is basalt your source for the range of blood, of ethylene glycol in the blood for a fatal case?
Basalt is one source. Winnick is a second source. Charles Winnick is a second source of blood level for ethylene glycol as well as Randall basalt, which are two
Right.
toxicology texts that
Right.
are utilized.
And basalt is the source of the information that says the average range is 0.3, was it 0.3 milligrams to 4.3 milligrams?
That's grams per liter or grams per kiloliter.
Okay.
Or grams per kilogram is the way they have it listed.
Is this, you want a copy? Do I get a copy of this?
That's the only one I have. I didn't know we'd do it.
Well, Your Honor, can you make copies? So that, I mean, this is there's a lot here. I want to have an opportunity to read it.
You know where the nearest copy machine is?
Well, I think we should take a recess, Your Honor. This is
No, I don't, that I don't want to do. We will in a while. How much more examination do you have for Dr. Straube? Can you move to another topic and then come back to this later?
Well, I think ethylene glycol was the sort of the last issue I was working on with
All right.
Dr. Chambliss.
Would you make a photocopy and we'll just proceed and then you'll get your copy in a minute. Go ahead.
You're gonna make how many copies? Did you want a copy also?
Yes, please.
How many copies are you? 3?
Yeah, make 3. What the heck?
And Dr. Chambliss, basalt is sort of a general toxicology textbook. Would that be fair to describe it?
I don't know if that's the term. I use it on a regular basis.
It's a reference material, right?
It's a reference toxicology textbook.
And it tries to cover the whole gamut of toxicology, right?
I don't know if it covers all of it. It covers enough of what we see in forensic toxicology.
It's a little bit like an encyclopedia of toxicology.
That would be a fair statement, yes.
And when you're working on a particular case involving a particular type of toxin, for example, you often will look at research studies that cover the subject in much more in depth, right?
No, I go to the forensic toxicologist. I don't go into as much depth research-wise.
Right, because you would want to consult the forensic toxicologist who has significantly greater experience, right?
In conjunction with the clinical history in which I have quite a bit of experience, we try to work out the case.
Right, and the toxicologist would be somebody who reads those journal articles I was talking about that evaluate ethylene glycol in much more detail, for example, ethylene glycol, for example, in much more detail, right?
Yes, they do read it in more detail.
Because in forensic pathology and in toxicology, unexpected, strange things happen all the time, right?
I don't know how to answer that question. Things happen, yes.
I mean, just one example. Are you aware of a case in which propionic acid was mistook for ethylene glycol in a laboratory?
I don't know why it would be, but I'll accept what you're saying.
And you wouldn't know that unless you did some specific studies, correct?
That would not be something I would be looking into unless I had a propionic or case.
And if you wanted to know, for example, what a lethal level of ethylene glycol in the blood was, you'd want hundreds, you'd want thousands of samples to know what the ranges had been found, right?
No, I would go to a reference text. I would talk to the forensic toxicologist. I would present the information to him, discuss the information, and even after talking to him, I may not accept his opinion on it. I may decide to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that it's something other than what he thought the cause of death was. Sometimes I do that.
We get one more. Well, for instance, if the reference material said, we examined three patients and the blood ranges were X to X, you wouldn't think that that was the whole universe of possibilities, right?
That's correct.
You'd want hundreds or thousands that they had examined in order to know what the possible ranges were, right?
Oh, I'd like to see how big their sample is, yes.
Okay. Judge, your copy's coming in a moment. Wait.
Wait.
I guess my exhibit copy's coming. I'm sorry. And other than basalt, I'm sorry, what was your other source you were relying on?
Winnick, Charles Winnick, W-I-N-E-K.
And how long can ethylene glycol stay in the blood?
It has a half-life of 2.5 to 3.5 hours, so it depends on how much you have in the bloodstream. And it breaks down in half depending on that amount, so it really depends.
And there are cases in which it's been much longer, right?
There are cases in which it's longer.
And so can you tell me the outer range?
No, I can't.
And you need to know that to know what's possible in terms of how long it can stay in the blood, right?
I need to know the longest of the half-life and also the amount that the person ingested and how frequently they ingested it.
Are these different?
No, those are the same, Your Honor.
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry. I think maybe
one for
we
each
have
eye,
enough.
huh?
Excuse me. I invite your attention to the top of page 427. And if you tell me if that's basalt's disposition of toxic drugs and chemicals in man.
Exhibit D16 is a copy of Basalt's 7th edition of Disposition of Toxic Drugs and Chemicals in Man.
Okay, and the top of page 427.
Oh, could you, I'm not sure of your question, Kid, I'm sorry.
Oh, could you go to the top of page 427?
Yes, I did. Okay.
And is that the information that you were relying upon in coming up with the range for?
No, I relied upon the Winnick numbers when I said 2,000 to 4,000, but I did also look at these particular items as well.
Okay. And 0.3 to 4.3, that's different than 2,000 to 4,000, right?
No, it's actually 300 micrograms per ml up to 4,300 micrograms per ml.
Right, and so Winnick says 2,000, and Basalt says 300.
Is the lowest range of what he considered fatal in his cases.
Okay, and where did, well, and let me have you go to the bottom of page 426.
Okay.
Okay? In the last sentence on 426 says, the following ethylene glycol concentrations were noted in the tissues of 9 persons who died within 6 to 48 hours of ingesting unknown amounts of the substance. And then it cites 3 sources, including Mr. Winnick, right?
That's not the Winnick level that I was referring to.
Okay.
The
But-
ones he had were 1989.
Okay. These concentrations were noted in the tissues of 9 persons, right?
That's correct.
And so all that Professor Basalt is saying is that out of those 9, their ranges were 300 micrograms up to 4,300 micrograms in the blood, right?
For fatal cases, but in the same paragraph above that, he says that some people have lived with 900 up to 9,050 micrograms per ml in the serum in 5 people. So you have 5 that live with higher levels. And so you have to look at it and question the information both ways.
Well, here's the thing. Where does Basalt say that this is a fatal range as opposed to just saying out of a group of 9 people, these are the blood ranges they had?
He's just given us something to refer to as a reference, that they do have some fatal cases. But you're right, I don't see Other than the cases that he's presented in that sentence, I don't know the ranges totally.
Right. And if you had a larger sample, and if you did more research, there may be a whole bunch of cases in which people had very little in their blood or none in their blood at the time they died from ethylene glycol poisoning.
I can't speculate. I'm not a person that can speculate on that. So I can't give you an answer to that. I don't speculate on that.
Right. But you're giving us an opinion without having done all the research or having all the knowledge on what the low-level possibility is, right?
This is my research. I'm utilizing this. Other than that, I can't speculate on a lot of other things. That's not something I'd want to do. I don't want to keep speculating when I've done some research on things.
But you understand that this is only a sample of 9 people, and you've acknowledged that you would want to have a much bigger sample to really understand what the possible blood levels are, right?
What it tells me is that there are all kinds of possibilities, but I can't speculate. I can't really speculate on it. I've just tried to answer that the best I can, and I will not speculate any longer. I just won't speculate on it.
You're done speculating.
Yes.
That's all I have.
Now, Doctor, you indicated that you have testified, or not testified, but that you've presented on suffocation deaths before?
Yes, I have. I've actually given lectures regularly on suffocation.
So you lecture on that quite frequently?
At least once a year.
Okay, and whom do you lecture to?
Other coroners and medical examiners. I haven't done it in the last year or so.
But you have lectured in the past on suffocation deaths?
Yes, I have.
Now, Doctor, when you were first spoken to about this case, did anybody ever tell you you're going to be testifying as to cause of death?
No, they did not.
Did anybody ever, really, what was the purpose that you thought you were coming here to testify about?
About my preliminary autopsy report and what I had done up to that particular point.
So I kind of sprung that on you yesterday.
You sprung it on me, yes.
Yes, and I apologize for that, Doctor. It wasn't intentional, but so you had not come here from California with the expectation of testifying about cause of death?
No, I had not.
Before coming to this courtroom, had you ever heard of or met Aaron Dillard?
No, I had not.
So certainly you've never spoken to Aaron Dillard or anybody else about this, was it subcutaneous injury? Is that how you would describe it, the injury?
Small amount of hemorrhage over the soft tissues on the left anterior chest.
And you know, I noticed that actually on page 3 of your report, Doctor, there's more of a specific description of the injury, and that you make reference to the second, third, and fourth ribs anteriorly, correct?
Yes, I do.
Now, I'll take off my shirt. Show them, if you could show, not take off my shirt, I'll take off my coat.
Take off your shirt.
No, I'm gonna take off my shirt. If you can step over here, Doctor. And we're talking about the, was it the right side?
Left side.
Left side. Could you show the jury on me where my second, third, and fourth rib are?
Well, the clavicle would be right there. First rib is right up under the clavicle. Second, third,
I
fourth
apologize.
ribs.
I'm sorry. Here.
Step back a little bit.
Here. Let's go back, all the way back over here so everybody can see.
Looking at the left front of his shirt, about the seam on the left front of his shirt, that's approximately the clavicle level. The first rib is very close up under the clavicle. Second rib is horizontally there. Palpable there would be the third rib, just below that, and fourth rib as you're coming down up above the nipple area. So that would be the area where the small area of hemorrhage would be.
So, and was the hemorrhage this way? Show the jury people how the hemorrhage was laid
I
out.
can't describe it any more than it covered a 3 rib area.
So if an arm was like this, if the person was laying on their side and their arm was like this underneath them, that would be about lining up where the hemorrhage was?
It goes right across that area.
You can return to your seat, doctor. Thank you. Now, at the time that you were doing the autopsy on Julie Jensen and you made those findings, nobody's spoken to you about the condition that they found Julie Jensen in at the crime scene, or the scene, is that correct?
That's correct.
And ordinarily, if you had been the medical examiner in Kenosha County at the time that this crime scene or this scene was uncovered, you would have responded to the scene?
Ordinary, yes.
And you
I
didn't
was,
have,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
and you didn't have the opportunity to do that in this case?
I was covering for the medical examiner, and I came down specifically just to do the autopsy.
Now, before testifying in this courtroom yesterday, had you ever disclosed to anybody that, or had anybody even made you aware of that photograph that shows Julie Jensen laying on her left side with her arm underneath her like this? Had anybody ever shown you that photograph before?
No.
So nobody ever linked up that photograph with these injuries across her chest until yesterday?
I had not linked it up whatsoever.
So you've never spoken to anybody about that before?
That's correct.
So there wouldn't have
I
been...
object to the leading.
Sustained.
So to your knowledge, would there have been any published report or any other source that Aaron Dillard or some other jail inmate could look at to come up with that information?
I'm not aware of anything.
Now, at the time that you performed the autopsy in this case, you had not seen the photographs of Julie Jensen's face shoved into the pillow, did you?
No, I did not.
Had you ever seen the photograph that depicts Julie Jensen's face with her nose and her mouth pushed off to one side?
No, I had not.
So you've never discussed that or written anything about that?
No, I had not.
So there would not be any source of
I
any
object to the continued leading.
Sustained.
So to your knowledge, would there be any source of information that any jail inmate or any other member of the public or any member of the media could look to that would provide that kind of information about that, the injury to her face or the markings on her face to be consistent with her face being shoved into the pillow?
Objection calls for speculation.
I asked him to his knowledge.
Well, that,
He's already said.
I think the form of the question is objectionable.
You've not produced any documents or any reports, nor have you ever done any interviews regarding this case?
Object. No, never mind.
No, I haven't. No, I haven't.
Now, you've also testified that you quite frequently about consulting with forensic toxicologists on your cases.
Yes, I have.
And when you do that, do you try to find a good or reputable forensic toxicologist?
Yes, I do.
Do you think you've done that in the past?
Yes, I have.
Is there any one particular forensic toxicologist that you consult with more than any other?
I would object.
What's the objection?
I think there's going to be some vouching going on.
So far, there's no objectionable question. The objection's overruled.
Is there any one particular forensic toxicologist you consult with more than any other?
Yes, I do.
And who is that?
Dr. Chris Long from St. Louis University Toxicology Lab.
Now, is there anything about your, now that you've heard all the questions on cross-examination and direct and redirect, is there anything about your physical examination of Julie Jensen, combined with the additional information that's been brought to your attention during the course of this trial, that would cause you to change your estimation that the cause of death in this case, the proximate cause of death, was suffocation?
Yes.
What is that?
The findings that were noticed in the gastrointestinal system, the first sentence on page 4 there, the hemorrhage of the mucosa of the hypopharyngeal muscles on the upper back of the thyroid cartilage of the larynx near the area up. I'm sorry.
Tell me where you are at. Doctor?
Again on page 4.
And where? What? Under what system? The
Gastrointestinal system. There is hemorrhage of the mucosa of the hypopharyngeal, hypopharyngeal muscles on the back, upper back of the thyroid cartilage of the larynx. That takes on quite a bit of importance. In addition to, on the same page under cardiovascular system, in the second sentence under cardiovascular system, there are multiple petechiae present over the left side and front of the pericardial sac as previously described. And going into the next sentence, on opening the sac, the usual amount of straw-colored fluid is seen with numerous epicardial petechiae present over the front and back of the heart.
Okay, now, doctor, I'm going to stop you there because you used a lot of words that I'm not familiar with. So let's start with, the hypopharyngeal, the hemorrhage of the mucosa of the hypopharyngeal muscles on the upper back of the thyroid cartilage of the larynx near the epiglottic folds. And I'll
Yes.
spell that for the benefit of the reporter.
Sure.
A-R-Y, because I don't want her to misquote me later, but it's A-R-Y-E-P-I-G-L-O-T-T-I-C. Now, could you put that in language that the rest of us can understand? What does that mean, the hemorrhage of the mucosa of the hypopharyngeal muscles?
Well, the muscles, the hypopharyngeal muscles are muscles at the very top of the esophagus, on the back of the tongue, on the back of the epiglottic area.
What's the epiglottic area?
It would be
Why don't
that
you-
little fold. If you look inside, you'd have to look inside someone's mouth, and you'd see the little thingy coming down from the roof of the mouth, which everybody knows what a thingy is. And then you go down from that, you'll see when you try to swallow, the epiglottic area is the thing that closes off your airway to allow you to swallow. So in the back, there's a flap that pretty much looks like my hand. It looks like a vertically directed structure just over the top of the airway, and it closes down and allows food to go down your esophagus. Well, right behind your esophagus is the hypopharyngeal muscles. And the mucosa is just the inside of that, the lining of that, which becomes, with pressure over the face or anything that goes inside the mouth or around the mouth, you can get hemorrhage of the muscle itself. So the muscles on the back of the epiglottic area, hypopharyngeal muscle, an explanation for that in the absence of any resuscitation event, which this case shows no evidence of resuscitation, it can be explained by smothering.
So you've seen that.
There's a request for a break, so we'll be in recess until 20 minutes to 11.
Please all rise.
Please don't talk about the case.